All right, back here on Inside Wrestling Radio, we're up to the interview portion of the program now, and we're pleased to welcome to the program today former WCW talent Lodi. Lodi started in 1995, and in 1997 made his debut on WCW as a part of Raven's Flock, and he went on to have a great deal of success in WCW, and we're going to talk about his time at the power plant and some different things leading up to what he's doing today. But right now, welcome to the program, Lodi. How you doing, brother?
Hey, man, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me today.
Oh, we really appreciate you coming on, man. It's a great thrill to have you on, and for anybody who followed WCW back during those real hot years when they were really making the world change, people were really fans of you and what you were doing there. Tell us a little bit, before we get into that stuff, though, what got you into the business? Were you always a fan? Did you have a friend in there that kind of brought you in? How'd you get involved?
Just like probably 90% of my friends that are wrestlers, I started out as a fan. From the time I was knee-high to a grasshopper, I grew up watching Ric Flair, Ricky Steamboat, Dusty Rhodes, and the Kid Call. I grew up here in North Carolina, so Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling was what I was raised on as a kid. And, you know, as I got a little older, every Saturday night, the guys were up in Greensboro at the Coliseum. My dad always take me on the weekends, and my buddies from school, we take a group of us up there. So once a month, you know, I told Dad later on, I said, you gave me a better job with my training than my college did, because that's what I ended up doing as an adult.
Right.
But, you know, so I grew up watching the Mid-Atlantic show every weekend, and then when I could, like, stick into the Greensboro Coliseum, even saw some of the shows in Winston-Salem. So as a kid, all through high school, even into college, I was always a big fan, you know. So that's where I grew up, and that's what I grew up with as far as aspirations of being a professional wrestler, other than having a hero or idol worship as a kid. Looking up to these guys, never really saw myself in reality doing that. When I beat up my little brother when I was a kid, I was always Ric Flair, and, you know, he was Ricky Steamboat, and I beat him up in our living room. And I was 6 years older, so Ric Flair always won in our house. You know, it wasn't quite fair, but that's the way it was, because I was bigger.
Yeah.
But, you know, then later on, I graduated from college from East Carolina University, and had a guy stop by my gym one day that I'd opened up and asked me if I'd sponsor a local wrestling show. Being a wrestling fan, I was like, sure, man, that'd be awesome. He and I got to chatting, and as I was filling right out a check, and he was showing me where they were going to put my ad in his little promo flyer there or whatever, he said, you know, have you ever thought about wrestling? He said, my wrestling trainer needs to get in better shape. In other words, he's starting to work out.
Yeah.
Maybe you guys could work out a deal. Me being a personal trainer, I thought maybe we could trade. And just so happened, his wrestling coach and trainer was the one and only C.W. Anderson. And I went up and met with C.W., and we worked out a deal where I would help him in the gym, and he was going to teach me how to wrestle. And the rest is kind of history there. He trained me for a couple of months, and I had my first match. Or, yeah, I could say I put on my wrestling outfit and some boots. I don't know necessarily that I had a great match, but I got started.
Right.
And then, you know, a couple years later, ended up after a stand down at the power plant on TV, like you said, and the rest is kind of history.
Sure. Now, so how long did you work the indies before you went to the power plant?
I would actually independent work less than a year, about a year and a half. It's a really neat story. I talk about it, and a lot of it, I have to admit, is not from my skill whatsoever, but just being in the right place at the right time and knowing the right people. I started with C.W. Anderson actually wrestling in November of '95, and he trained twice a week at a small barn on a nursery plant farm outside of Smithfield, North Carolina, up towards Raleigh. Right. I was down in Greenville at the time, down where I graduated college, like I said, from East Carolina, but I had my gym there. So twice a week, I drove about an hour and a half each way to go to wrestling school, basically.
Sure.
Again, like I said, this school was a barn with a ring in it, the tractors beside the ring and all that kind of stuff, kind of a dilapidated building.
Right, yeah.
You know, and the first 4 times I went up there, I came home just beaten and bruised, and I mean, I was sore, I was banged up, I had a hard time walking around the next day, and the 5th day I show up, and he looks at me when I walk in, and he looked at me and he said, you're going to keep coming back, aren't you? And I said, well, yeah, I thought you were training me to wrestle. Why wouldn't I keep coming back?
Right.
He said, oh, man, I haven't been teaching you how to wrestle. I've been beating you up for 2 weeks to see if you'd quit.
Yeah, exactly.
And, so about my first 4 episodes of climbing into a ring was basically just to get my rear end kicked. And he's like, now we'll start teaching you how to work if you're going to keep coming back. So he worked with me for a couple more months. And like I said, I had a little 6-man tag match where I went in and did my first little match in late January of '96. And shortly after that, I met up with my first tag team partner, Curtis White, who wrestled under the name Toad and a couple other names. Kurt and I formed a tag team called Dangerous Minds. We realized if we wanted to go anywhere on the indies, there were some decent singles wrestlers, but there weren't a whole lot of good tag teams. And we thought together, there weren't people who wrestled strictly as a tag team. Maybe we could climb up the ranks in Indies a little quicker as a tag team than we could by ourselves.
Yeah.
We worked together for a little over a year and had a great time and started getting booked, and we were working in semi-main events against the Rock and Roll Express and some of the guys that we had looked up to as kids.
Sure.
They were coming back down as far as finished with their career on TV, but still working doing indie stuff. And one night we did a show, and a guy watched us wrestle by the name of George Weingroff, who used to work at USWA years ago, talked to us about going down the power plant. George was legally blind at the time, but he could see shadows and shapes. And he came to our hotel room after our match, after we'd done this for about a year and a half, and watched us and said, you guys can main event these armories and high school gyms forever, or you can go down to Atlanta and get a real job. He said, Pistol Pez Watley's one of the trainers. You guys need to go to the power plant. And he walked out of the hotel room. That was it. And so we looked into it, and a month later we went down and tried out the power plant and went through that 3-day Alicia tryout, which later on we all learned was just a big work to make money, and it made a lot.
Yeah.
So many people quit going through it.
Sure, yeah.
And I made it through. Toad didn't make it through his second day. He quit. He said, brother, good luck, but I'm out.
He had enough, huh?
I made it through, and, we got to the hotel room that day. He said, man, I just can't do this physically. I was in the military, and it was the hardest 3 days of my life as far as anything physical. We had 30 or 40 guys coming through a month, paying $250 each to try out down at the power plant.
Right.
And WCW didn't need 40 wrestlers a month. They already had 150 on contract. So basically, it was Sergeant's job to run these guys off after they paid them $250. And we had 27 people tried out when I went down, and 3 of us made it through.
Wow.
And one of the guys, when he finished, he was like 5'6", 5'7", maybe. He had a nice build, but he wasn't very heavy. He made it through the 3 days of hell. They shook his hand and said, congratulations, you're too small, we can't use you.
Unbelievable.
I'm like, whoa, brother. The guy's like, you couldn't tell me that beforehand? Can I get my money back? And they're like, nah, thanks. And so you realize pretty quick what it was, but what happened for me was I made it through, went home, packed my stuff, and moved down the next Monday and went to the power plant and was there a couple of months. And next thing you know, I ran into Raven, and a friend of ours introduced us in a bar one night, and Raven hired me as his personal trainer, and we went from there.
So backing up just a little bit about the power plant, after you completed your technical training there in the power plant, after the 3 days of hell and all that stuff, what did you do after that leading into the meeting with Raven? Did you just kind of go down there and help other guys out, or what was the deal with that?
I got you. The cool thing about the power plant was it truly was a wrestling school with good trainers and good coaches there. And when I went back down, there were a lot of things I learned wrestling under CW, a lot of things I learned working on the indies, but my basic work wasn't so great. I didn't wrestle in high school, so this is all new to me. I mean, I learned it as a win. It wasn't like I had a big background in wrestling.
Sure, yeah.
So, you had 3 trainers there. There was Mike Winter, who worked with all the new guys. Like your first couple of months, you worked with Mike Winter, and you learned how to lock up, and you learned how to do your basic holds and basic wrestling moves and things until you felt more comfortable and looked more fluid and realistic doing it. And then at some point, you moved up to working with Sarge, Dwayne Bruce, who trained, he came on WWF for a while for helping train Goldberg and that kind of stuff. But Sarge was a stiff bastard.
Yeah.
Sarge would beat you up in the ring. He believed in making it look good, but, he laid it in, too, which, it has its pluses and minuses. You can't work that style every day because
he'll kill you.
Crippled by the time you're 35.
Exactly.
But, so that's what was going on down. And the third trainer was Pistol Pez Watley, who the whole time I was there never once climbed in the ring. Pez was kind of the psychology guy, and believe it or not, Pez had psychology down, and I think he could teach wrestling psychology to a goat. So you kind of went through a progression of starting with Mike Winter and getting the basic stuff down. And you go in with Sarge, you really learn how to work, put some of the moves all together, and make everything look nice and snug. When it came time to learn the psychology of putting a match together, kind of moved over and started working with Pez. So you went through this natural progression.
Right.
And so while I'm doing this Monday through Friday, I'd sold my gym, and so I really wasn't working other than just wrestling on the weekend. I'd go to wrestling school Monday through Friday, take what I learned, use it on the weekend, and then when Monday came, back at school again, we'd go back through what we did on the weekend, what worked, what didn't. And along that time, like I said, I met Raven and became his personal trainer, and then that led to a couple of weeks after being his personal trainer, he hired me as his personal assistant.
Right.
Basically, everybody's like, oh, you ran errands for Raven? I'm like, yes, I did.
Gotcha.
He asked me to do things for him. Basically, when he was on the road and he was traveling, go pick up his dry cleaning, make sure his mail got checked. Odds and ends and errands, things that he didn't have time for and didn't want to mess with, he paid me to do. And when he was in town, basically, I'm glad to say I was his flunky. And basically what we did
Lodi, let me hold you up right there. We're up on a break. We'll pick it up right there when we come back. More Inside Wrestling Radio coming up next with Lodi.